Hi guys, welcome to episode 10 of Sanj Surati Talks. I'm so glad to have you guys listening in on us. We're having so much fun on these podcasts. This is number 10, which is quite big for me. I've got a fantastic guest for you today. She is based in LA at the moment, so we're going transatlantic right now. It's about 8 a.m, so it's quite early for her over there. Please welcome to the stage, Tara Joseph.
Hi, it's lovely to be here chatting to you, however early it might be over here.
Yes, I was going to say, because I didn't know you were based in LA until sort of closer to this date. So what time is it over there at the moment?
It is 22 minutes past 8. So I quickly grabbed a banana and a piece of toast, but the kettle's still boiling.
Awesome. You're a Brit at heart, right? You were born in the United Kingdom.
Yes. I grew up in London. I lived in London before I moved over to La La Land.
Brilliant. And so there's going to be a few people who are listening to this podcast who don't know much about you. Please give us, just a synopsis of who you are and, what you do.
Okay. Well, I'm primarily a music manager. And as I just mentioned, I grew up in London. And actually originally decided that I wanted to be an actress and worked for the late Michael Winner for a few years as his assistant.
Wow.
In the house that Robbie Williams now owns, actually. And he basically said to me, Tara, you're never going to be an actress. It's never going to work. You just don't have the right thing about you. So I was like, okay, well, that's a bit depressing. I've just come out of drama school.
Yeah.
So, he actually said other things to me which are not repeatable right now.
Oh, gosh.
But so he said, go into the business side. I think you'll do well there. So I was like, okay. So I originally started out, I got a job replacing an assistant who was on maternity leave at a small talent agency in London. And from there, I moved up the ranks to a really great boutique agency where, again, I was an assistant. Stayed there for a couple of years, working for an amazing agent. Then I went to ICM. And from there, I went to William Morris before it became WME.
Right.
And so I'm talking in the late 90s right now. And I eventually became an agent at William Morris and had a really amazing time working there. I was sort of the young agent at the time who was looking after the sort of the young hot actors. So back then it was like Charlie Hunnam and Jamie Draven, who was in Billy Elliot. But I also looked after the crossover artists. So when I say crossover, it was sort of people who came from modeling or music who wanted to act. And I was a bit ahead of the game, actually, because everyone does that now. But when I did it back then, no one really got it.
Right.
So I spent time, working with a lot of the very big music people at that time, the pop stars, so like the Spice Girls and the All Saints. And I ended up, fortuitously, when William Morris closed its London doors, managing Nicole and Natalie Appleton of All Saints. And that sort of was my first foray into the music industry. And I realised that working in music rather than just solely concentrating on acting was something that really excited me. When I started out, I had no idea about anything. I was literally thrown in at the deep end. But I think in some instances, ignorance can be bliss because I was fearless.
Yeah.
So I had this amazing time working with the Appletons. And after that came to its natural end in around 2003, I managed a few other artists who were working with Universal. And then was fortunate enough to be introduced to Katherine Jenkins and her manager at the time, and ended up co-managing Katherine before I solely managed Katherine on my own. And that period of my life lasted about 8 years.
Wow.
And during that, and clearly an iconic figure in the UK, absolutely amazing artist to work with, so professional, and such a good person from such a good family. I adore her family. But through all of my trips backwards and forwards with Katherine to LA, I was fortunate enough to meet my wife, Alyssa, when Katherine moved over here to do Dancing with the Stars. So over a period of time, I fell madly in love and realized that after Dancing with the Stars, doing a 2-year transatlantic relationship wasn't really going to work for me. So I thought, okay, well, the music industry, the hub of it is, in my opinion, in LA. Everything moves so quickly in LA, and also I'm madly in love and my heart is in LA. So I really think I need to move to LA. So I packed my bags, bought a house here, married Alyssa all in the same week in 2014. Right. And in 2015, I moved here.
That's amazing.
And that actually, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but that's why I called my podcast For Love and Music, because those are the two reasons that I emigrated to LA. Wow. And now I set up my business here, still looking after musicians and people in entertainment, but also I realized that in LA, whatever you set your heart on doing, however big the dream, if you really, really believe you can make it happen, anything is possible. I think more so than being in the UK, where people sort of go, well, you do that, so that's what you should stick at doing. Whereas here, all of a sudden I found myself in TV formatting and creation, and set up a company called Dantar Productions with my partner in crime, the lovely Brit Danny Bear, who you probably remember.
Wow.
So, now I find myself managing amazing people in the music industry, running Dantar Productions, and also hosting For Love and Music. And I became a citizen a couple of years ago. Well, no, 1 year ago, actually. And now I'm here sitting talking to you. So it's been quite a journey. And I'm hoping that I will be able to fly back to the UK soon once we come out of COVID lockdown.
So let's talk about LA. I mean, I'm going to ask you what brought you to LA, but you've answered that. I love LA, me being within the entertainment space. Whenever I'm out there, I've got a couple of clients that I work with. It's a different type of mindset to how London specifically works for various reasons, particularly that reason that you touched on about that sense of ambition and how there is an openness for you, if you've got a creative idea, to really push that idea and go for that idea. And so many people that I've met in LA are really energized by what you bring to the table. What are your thoughts about that?
I definitely have a positive view on Los Angeles. I think that you have to wade through a whole load of BULLSHIT. I can't spell, sorry. But you know what I'm trying to say. You have to wade through all of that to get to where you want to go. And people promise you the world and deliver nothing. And sometimes, but as I said, whatever you set your heart on doing, whatever you believe in, if you believe in it strongly enough, there's someone out there who'll listen. And I think that there's more of a wall in the UK. And had I not left the UK, I don't think I would have started a podcast. I don't think I would be speaking to all the TV production companies that I speak to on a daily basis. I think that it's a tough place to be, because the competition is so fierce here. There's no they don't suffer fools, but you just have to, and it can be a lonely place. I mean, I think I've heard, fortunately, I've been in a relationship since I came here, but I've heard that being single in LA can be very tricky.
I can imagine.
Because it's so big, it's so sprawling. And forgetting about coronavirus and all of that, I just think that for now, I think that it's it makes it a lot easier coming here and being romantically connected as well, because being in a relationship in LA can be one of the best cities in the world to be with someone in, because there are so many things you can do. And I think that, alongside the working side of it, made it a sort of dream situation for me. Saying that, there are lots of things about the UK that I miss. I miss the realness of the UK. I miss the realness of doing business with people in the UK. Right. I actually do a lot of business still in the UK, because I have a number of artists who are signed to Decca Records, which is part of Universal Music. And I love dealing with the team there. I think when you speak to Brits, they generally, if they say they're going to do something, they do it. And it's not all sort of airy-fairy and promising you the world. They may not promise you as much, but they're going to deliver. And I love it's sort of like a familiar armchair to me, the UK, and that's how I feel when I go back. You sort of you go back to the UK, and the only thing that has changed really are the ages of your friends' children. Yeah. And it feels familiar, and walking down Kensington High Street or Oxford Street, it just feels warm and cozy, because it's your sort of, it's everything that you remember, and it feels nostalgic. And I feel like that when I speak to, people from the UK when I'm here. But I love LA. I love what it has to offer. I love the eating experience here. I love what the restaurants have to offer. I prefer the eating out experience in LA to London. The food just seems to suit me better. And yes, it's a great place to be. I feel very fortunate and very blessed that I have the ability to have both the UK and California, in my life. Yeah.
Was the transition for you moving to LA difficult? Were there any sort of hurdles that you had to overcome?
Things in the UK that feel so familiar. So having a doctor, I had all of that set up in the UK, knowing you can use the National Health Service if you want to. Well, you don't have that here. So right. I would say the medical side of it was quite a challenge, because you have to have medical insurance here, otherwise you're screwed. And you have to know, so the medical side of it here was a challenge for me. Obviously I had Alyssa, my wife, who was able to sort of steer me through certain ways of doing things, like even writing a check here is slightly different. So it was, I think the first year was definitely acclimatizing. And actually the first year, I remember I kept getting sick. I kept getting colds. Right. And someone said to me, who also moved here, God, the first year I was here, I was constantly having colds. And I think it's just because you're adjusting to the climate change, because it's just so different. It's incredibly dry here. And so that actually, without sounding like a hypochondriac, that actually the climate was something to deal with as well. But it's really just getting to know how different things work. And even now, I'm still sometimes learning. I remember I was in Palm Springs with Alyssa, and there was a guy who was, we were staying in this particular place, and there was this nice man cleaning the pool. And I said to him, gosh, you're doing such a thorough job, aren't you? And he looked at me like he didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And he went over to Alyssa, who he knew quite well afterwards, and he said, I'm really not sure what your wife said to me. She said something thorough. What does that mean? And obviously the word here is thorough. And so it's like, I should have said, you're doing such a thorough job, but clearly I wouldn't, because I'm British. But there are sort of sometimes language barriers. I remember going to the supermarket saying, I need a plaster. Can you tell me where I can get plasters? Again, it's like, What are you talking about? Oh, Band-Aid. Okay. So, but you know, there are always going to be good things and bad things about a place that you live. I love the outdoorsy side of LA. I never had that really in the UK. I found I never really took any exercise in the UK, and that's not the UK's fault. That's my fault. But here I'm, you know, an avid hiker and all of those sorts of things. So, but it's not, you have to, moving anywhere new it does take a minute to get your head around it. It doesn't just happen, the ease of it overnight. It definitely takes time. Nice. To build relationships as well. I miss my friends, you know. When you've lived somewhere for, how many years have I been here now? So I'm 49. So I've lived in the UK for 43 years. So you've got friendships of 30, 35 years, and you just don't have that here. Right. And I miss those deep-rooted historical friendships. Yeah.
Are there any Brits that are moved over there that you're connected with?
Yes, obviously I mentioned Danny. I had a friend who was very senior at the British consulate here. So through him, I met a lot of expats and have built some great friendships with a lot of Brits, which, you know, I really value and I love. One of my other business partners in a group I look after is British, who's a dear friend. So yes, I know a lot of Brits here. Which is lovely.
Whenever I go out to LA, a lot of the people I gravitate to are people that I've met in London. So some ex-students, some comedians that I used to do stand-up with, and some people that I went to university with who were from California originally, and then I studied with them and then they went back. And it does feel like, from my experience of LA, I haven't actually met any people that were born in LA.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's a very transient place. People come in for a few years and they move on again. There are a lot of people that do that. The property market here is quite extraordinary. I hear a lot about it, and I actually know quite a lot of real estate agents because of some of the TV shows that we've been developing, and they constantly, their phone rings off the hook from people who are moving either from the other side of the country or from the Middle East or from the UK or wherever it might be. But there's a lot of movement here all the time. But one thing actually that I have also embraced since I moved to LA that I didn't really sort of focus on too much when I was in the UK was the fact that I'm Jewish. And being Jewish in LA is quite a fabulous thing to be. And it's a very Jewish friendly city. And obviously, you know, and what I found so interesting was that come Christmas in the UK, everyone wishes you happy Christmas. Yeah. But in LA, people don't say that. They wish you happy holidays because they don't know whether you're celebrating Hanukkah or Christmas. Right. And in the UK, I never really, you know, I'm not a religious Jewish person, but I love being Jewish. And here it's so embraced and so sort of celebrated that you feel like you really belong simply because there are so many Jews and there are so many Jewish holidays that everyone's always celebrating one, even though I'm not sort of necessarily active in that. Yeah. Whereas in the UK, I was just Jewish and that was fine and lovely. But it's a great place to be Jewish.
That's interesting. And so has moving to LA kind of reignited your Judaism identity?
I just think that I know more about it, I would say. I feel more Jewish. Wow. I know more Jewish people. It would never even have crossed my mind to celebrate Hanukkah in the UK. Whereas here it's like, well, are you? And I still, you know, I was brought up with Christmas trees and everything. So, but I don't necessarily celebrate it, but I love that it's so it's so celebrated here. It's a great place to be Jewish.
That's
whereas there are lots of places in the US where it's not so great to be Jewish.
I've heard. So whereabouts in LA are you based?
I live in Sherman Oaks, in the hills, which is idyllic. So I guess that's like living in Richmond, I guess.
Yeah.
So you're sort of, or maybe Chiswick, I'm not sure, but somewhere like that. And you're sort of, I'm about 20 minutes from West Hollywood, but at the same, so close, but at the same time, that little bit further away that you feel like you're sort of in the middle of nowhere. Because I live on the side of a mountain, so I've got a beautiful view.
Wow.
And when I originally saw this house, I'm not into feng shui or anything like that, but I came in, I'm like, oh my God, this house got great feng shui and what a view. So I was sort of sold on the spot.
Amazing. I mean, I love LA. I mean, it's massive. Like, there's so many parts of it, and there's so many different types of vibes, you know, depending on where you go. I mean, you know, you've got the beach life, but then you've also got the city life. You've got the Hollywood life, which is like on the strip, and there's so many different things going on. There's like the film world, there's the music world. It's cool. Yeah,
no, it really is. And I think it's extraordinary that if you get up super early one morning, you can be on the slopes skiing, and if you leave at lunchtime, you can be on the beach having a cocktail in the afternoon.
Yeah,
and that's quite unique.
Let's delve into your current career at the moment. Tell us about Dantar Productions.
So Dantar Productions is a mixture of Danny and Tara, hence Dan and Tar. And we set that up a couple of years ago. Danny is very creative, and she, alongside doing her TV stuff, is also a registered realtor and real estate agent here. So she had a whole load of very interesting show ideas relating to real estate. So we teamed up and started creating all of these different formats, whether they be in real estate or, I mean, anything really. But one of the things that we specialize in is cast-led shows. So, for example, we will think of an idea, we'll go out and get that cast, and we will then approach a third-party production company, because we don't have the cameras or anything like that. So we will then go to a E1 or a Pilgrim Media or a Monami or, an Endemol, and say, okay, we've got this idea. Our cast is attached. Are you interested? Then if the production company say yes or no, we then do a deal with them, and then we approach the network. Sometimes, in more recent times, actually, Danny and I have been doing things directly with the networks. So we have relationships with Netflix, with Quibi, HGTV. We also have relationships in the UK. So lockdown actually has been quite an interesting time for us in TV.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for every yes to get something commissioned, there are probably 5,000 no's.
Yeah.
But saying that, we have built some amazing relationships, and it's sort of exciting. We'll see where it takes us. But music management is my primary focus.
And do you do that within Dantar, or is Dantar...
No, Dantar's separate. So my management company is called Jam Artist Group.
Jam Artists.
And then there's Dantar, which is separate.
And tell us about Jam Artists.
So Jam, I realised with the experience that I had with Katherine Jenkins that the classical crossover world was really the world that... a part of the music industry that I love working in. I love all types of music, but as far as actually working day to day in the music industry, that's the area that excites me most. So the artists that I work with right now generally are in that space. As I mentioned earlier, I work a lot with Decca UK, who are an amazing label, absolutely brilliant. And I've got a producer who called Patrick Hamilton, who is signed to Decca Publishing, and he's just produced Katherine's latest album, actually, which came out a few days ago, and he also produced her last two albums, which were really well received, went to #1 on the classical chart. Then I look after a girl called Iman Bisha, who is 11, and she won Arab's Got Talent when she was 8, and then was a finalist in America's Got Talent. She's got the most extraordinary soprano voice.
Wow.
And she's an amazing talent, and obviously she's got the rest of her life ahead of her, so it'll be exciting to see where that takes her. I look after a top secret project, which I can't talk about yet.
No problem.
With Decca, which I'm sure I'll be able to talk about imminently. And then I look after a guy called Josh Pitterman, who is Australian and has been playing the lead of Phantom in Phantom of the Opera in the West End, and also has other very exciting things going on that I can't talk about right now. So really but all of them fall into that sort of classical crossover genre, although obviously my producer works in all areas of the music industry. So it's great. I love it.
How long have you been running Jam Artists for?
For quite a few years. I changed probably like 9 years.
Wow.
8 years. I changed it. It was called Jam, and then I added Artist Group because it was easier for the website.
It sounds like, you're well versed in the circles within the industry that you work in, and you understand it and you're successful. What are the challenges that you face as a music manager in our current era at the moment?
Well, just starting with that then, I guess in the music industry, it's drastically affected the live world. So any live dates have all been pushed to next year. So really, it's just been a question of looking outside of the box and looking at innovative things that you can do to try and create money-making opportunities for your artists, or just not even money-making opportunities, just opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. It's been interesting. I mean, for example, Josh, he went on a Isolation World Tour on Instagram, and which worked really well, actually. So
wow.
Every day, or no, maybe 3 times a week, he was one day he was in Barcelona, the next day he was in Rome, the next day he was in Melbourne. And it was a really fun and engaging thing to do on his socials. But it's been challenging because there's just no live. But as far as my day to day, I mean, I work from home. I have a home office. So that hasn't really affected me. And I, recently actually through my podcast, I've been interviewing a lot of composers, some of whom are Emmy winners. And I've been sort of saying to them, so how has, usually you're in chosen isolation. How has forced isolation affected your day to day? And generally it sort of hasn't. And I think for me, even though it's been forced isolation, it hasn't changed the fact that I work from home, really.
Yeah.
But in the music industry in general, I think you wanted to know just my general feeling. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, some people, obviously it's a male dominated world. The music industry is male dominated. There aren't that many female managers. And I think that when I first started off and I was looking after, my initial clients in the music industry, the Appletons, I think it was who is this girl that's just come in looking after these 2 girls who, these big stars, who the hell does she think she is? And I've only sort of experienced that kind of feeling initially when I started. Whereas I think being a woman in the industry for me, generally, I think has worked to my advantage. I've never felt sort of, oh my God, I have to prove myself more and more and more simply because I'm female. I think that you have to, whether you're male or female, you have to be a survivor. And I definitely have had the good times, but I've definitely had the tough times, really, you know, because as a manager, you work on commission.
Yep.
And sometimes it's all rolling in and sometimes it really isn't. And you have to really, really want to do this, because being a manager, I would say, is sometimes more of a vocation than a job, because it can be 24/7.
Yep.
And so I feel like I'm a survivor. I feel like I keep going when I could easily have given up, and when I could sometimes have thought, oh my God, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And then another window, is it a window or a door that opens? Opens, and you're like, oh wow, I know why I do this. I know why I can't give up. And when I've, you know, had the down times and my mother's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Leave this business. It's so hideous. And then, as I just said, something will happen and you'll be like, this is why I do it. I really love what I do. It's an amazing profession to be in. I feel lucky. I feel very lucky, but it's not a walk in the park, that is for
Absolutely.
sure.
It's so refreshing to hear that from you. And that's what I love about the entertainment space, is you kind of see a vision that not many people around you can see, and you work towards it. And it is challenging, but when you do break through that barrier and you create something, those doors do open. And then there's other exciting opportunities behind those doors. But it's only through that perseverance, through that challenge, that you can get to that door and see what's behind it. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You just got to have drive, and you've got to believe in yourself. Even when, you know, people do shut the door on you, you just got to keep going. You got to believe. You got to really believe. I know that sounds a bit sort of like airy fairy, but it's sort of true.
Yeah.
You've got to have tenacity and drive.
Yeah.
Because nothing, you know, generally things aren't just given to you. I mean, I feel like I've had to fight for, you know, for a lot of things. But when the good things happen, it's really amazing. It's really wonderful.
Absolutely. And also those challenges, those tough times really do shape you as a person. I mean, I haven't seen you in a long time, Tara, but just talking to you, I can hear in your voice there's a purity about what you do. And that's really, really important, because a lot of people, when they're starting out, they don't really have a defined direction, and you can kind of hear it in their voice. And I can just tell from speaking to you that you're just in control. And it's through all of that experience that you've managed to attain that control.
Well, thank you. And I think definitely age is the older you get, the more you know, and you keep learning every single day. I remember when I first went to William Morris, my title was talent coordinator, and I hated that title. It basically meant that I worked for all the agents, compiling all of the different castings that were going on around, you know, in the US and in the UK, and compiling a list and giving it to them so they could put their artists up for it. And all I wanted to be was an agent. I'm like, screw this. I'm above this. I don't want to be talent coordinator. And I was like, I don't know, I was about 26 or something at the time, 27. And I know everything. And one of the senior agents there said to me, you're just not ready. You're not ready to have a client list yet. You just trust me. And she was so right. And about a year later, because it didn't take all that long, a year later I was promoted, and all of a sudden I was an agent. And I think in my 20s, I was so overly ambitious that I would have done anything to get where I felt I needed to be. And I think as you get older, you realize that that's not necessarily really important. It's just about building the relationships and, you know, doing the best job you can possibly do for your clients, and, you know, taking it all with a pinch of salt, because we're in the entertainment industry. We're not making cures for cancer here, which, my God, is an admirable task, but it's, I feel like I've definitely learned a lot. And now when I'm with youngsters who sometimes, not all the time, but think that they know everything, I'm not critical, but I'm like inside thinking, gosh, you're just going to grow and grow and grow. And you might think you know everything now, but really you know very little. And by the time you're 40, you're going to be a much better manager or whatever you might be than you are now. Because time just gives you that. It really does.
So let's talk about your podcast, which is kind of like a different side of you. With regards to being a manager, you're always behind the scenes looking after people's careers. And now the podcast is kind of like, it's about your voice. Tell us about it.
Well, I love doing For Love and Music. I really, really do. And when I first started out, I was like, oh my goodness, as you just said, I've always been behind the camera, so to speak. How is this going to work? And with the first couple of episodes that I did, hopefully no one can hear, but actually I was quite nervous because I wanted it to sound right. And I also felt like people in the business may be listening to what I was saying. So I felt like I had to get it right. But one of the things that was important to me was that I never came across as someone who was a Miss Know-it-all in the music industry, that I was some big music aficionado who knew all the digital statistics and the worldwide statistics. And I wanted to be someone who could have conversations about music with like-minded people rather than being too business focused. I didn't want to be talking about necessarily about chart positions and who's selling more albums than someone else right now. So I also didn't want to, catch myself out. Do you know what I mean? I just wanted to be able to have some fun, informative and entertaining conversations, which I think and I hope I've achieved. So I've been very fortunate to have some amazing guests on the show. I've spoken to fellow managers. I've spoken to Tina Guo, who's one of the biggest cellists, electronic cellists in the world.
Wow.
I've spoken to one of my recent podcasts was with Ronique Kirchman, who wrote all the music for The Sinner 1, 2 and 3, which is a great series on Netflix.
My wife
USA.
and I just finished it last night, actually.
Right. Okay. Well, she did all the music, so she
really
was
good
brilliant.
Music.
I've spoken to big time UTA agents. I've spoken to top music industry executives. So it's really exciting, and I've got more guests coming out that I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone. So I'm just sort of doing it and seeing where it takes me, really. I was lucky enough last week to interview a guy called Charlie Harding, who has one of the biggest music podcasts called Switched on Pop. And it was really interesting talking to him and hearing his process and how he's gone about turning what was a hobby into a big business. It was really fascinating listening to his journey. But, I love it. I'm excited for people to hear what my guests and I discuss. I've got another episode coming out shortly with an amazing manager called Tavia Osby, who is based out of New Orleans, and she manages the Grammy-nominated act Tank and the Bangers. And, her journey and how she achieved what she's achieved. It's just fascinating. I learn from people. I really do. Every time I interview someone, I learn so much. Loved chatting to the tenor Jonathan Antoine, who's a delight. And also love chatting to my dear friends at the Trans Chorus of LA. So it's been a really amazing experience, and one that hope I can continue to do and that people will continue to enjoy listening to.
So how many episodes have you done?
Well, initially I was releasing under the banner of La La Landed. So, gosh, we had about 45 episodes there.
Wow.
And then I branched out on my own and just went with my solo podcast for Love and Music, which fell under La La Landed. And now I think there are like, gosh, about 16 episodes that have been released so far.
I've only just started doing them since COVID's happened. It was kind of like a venture I wanted to explore. And, you know, I'm doing like a self-help podcast about stage presence. But then I've started doing ones where I'm talking to people like you. And I'm loving it. I'm just loving these conversations, just keeping them open, just keeping them natural. You know, just like you, not trying to create this unapproachable persona that's kind of all knowing, all seeing. It's just being really open with people and being vulnerable with the person that you're talking to, who's also being vulnerable with you, which is a wonderful experience.
Yeah, no, I totally am there with you. I really understand what you're saying.
And it's also just really nice, you know, once it's out there, just some of the messages that I've been getting from people that I have no idea who they are, but they've listened to the podcast and gone, wow, you know, this podcast has helped me in some way, or it's inspired me in some way, which is beautiful. It's just really wonderful, just during this time particularly.
Interestingly, and which sort of touched me, was that I interviewed on La La Landed a woman who is very senior at the Farrah Fawcett Foundation, but she also has a severely autistic daughter. And she spoke about how life is as the mother of an autistic child. And out of the blue, she was contacted by, she's based in LA, down the road from me, actually. And out of the blue, she was contacted by someone who'd listened to the podcast in the UK who had an autistic child, basically saying how much the episode had inspired her and what other help and advice could she give. So that was really lovely to hear that the podcast had traveled, so to speak, to the other side of the world. I mean, obviously it's a digital thing, so it can, but it just was lovely that it had helped someone.
That's what I feel, you know, we're doing with the creation of this type of content, where you're nurturing communities and networks of people that are interested in what you have to say, and it just allows them to kind of see a different perspective, but also gets them to kind of reflect on the perspective, whether they agree with it or not, which is, you know, so important to all of the communities all over the world.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, clearly podcasts have been around for a long time, but now they appear to be booming. And and obviously since lockdown, I think that people are embracing them more and more.
So if anyone wants to listen to your podcast, it's on all podcast channels, right? Yeah,
on all podcast channels and through my website, which is www.jamartistsgroup.com/podcast.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that in the linen notes of this podcast. I just wanted to go back to your past, and it was something that you touched on at the beginning of this podcast, and I just found it quite interesting. So you studied as an actor initially.
I did.
Where did you go to drama school?
I went to the London Academy of Performing Arts, which has since shut.
When did it shut?
I'm not sure, actually. It wasn't a very good one. I auditioned for all of the big ones and I didn't get in.
Right.
And my cousin, who was a casting director at the time, was like, Tara, don't go to this place. You know, I'm not sure it's, you know, worth it. But I was like, no, I want to go. So I was very headstrong, and I wasn't at school, you know, I wasn't particularly academic, and so going to university was just not on my horizon. It was just not something that would have worked for me, I don't think. I wanted to be creative. I'd sit there in history lessons dreaming about winning an Oscar. I was that kind of person.
Wow.
Or kid. So I went to drama school, and I really enjoyed it, actually. It was a very different experience to, you know, going to the school that I'd gone to. But I went there and came out of drama school and three friends of mine and I decided that we'd form an all singing, all dancing cabaret act in order to get our equity cards. So we formed this group called Cameretta, which was a mixture of all of our names.
Right.
And we went dancing around old age people's homes and pitched some pianos, you know, that restaurant.
Yeah.
And eventually singing songs from The Boyfriend and tap dancing. And incidentally, I've literally got two left feet. We did get our equity cards. And my mother at the time was living quite close to Michael Winner. And I was an out of work actress and I needed to earn some money. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I can work for him. So I dropped a letter through his letterbox saying, you know, dear Mr. Winner, I live down the road. This is when he was going out with the lovely Jenny Seagrove.
Right.
And I got a call from his right-hand man saying, Mr. Winner would like to meet you. So I went to meet him and he was typical brash Michael Winner. And I literally became the person who sat in his kitchen all day. I was about 21 at the time. I sat in his kitchen all day. I went out and bought him the Evening Standard twice a day when you had to buy it. Yeah. Still had to buy it. And I mean, that's all literally I did. I'd answer the door and buy in the Evening Standard. And I did that for a few months until I decided to form a production company which I called Mass Production, where I was showcasing actors to industry executives. And I ran it out of the Pizza on the Park venue on Hyde Park Corner.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, and then I went back to Michael Winner, and because I needed to make some more money. And he's like, what are you doing? You're never going to make any money doing mass production. And that's when he said, you're never going to be an actress. Go and get a job as an agent. And he basically was like, you just don't have the right look to be an actress. Go and be an agent. And so that's how it all sort of happened. So I wrote some letters to agents and I got this job at an agency.
That first agency that you started working at, which one was that?
God, I don't even know if they still exist. They were called Chuck Julian Associates.
Okay.
And it was certainly a learning curve.
Yeah.
But then I was very fortunate to go and work for an amazing agent who I still am dear friends with to this day, called Roxanne Vacker, who is amazing. She's a brilliant agent with a brilliant eye and an amazing roster of artists. And I worked for her for 2 years before I went to ICM.
Awesome. And just going back to your acting career.
Oh, God.
Do you still act?
No, I don't act. I went on a few castings back in the day, and I got one interview with a really big casting director, and I was like, okay, what do I wear? So I thought, okay, well, if I wear like multicolored trousers and a sort of fluorescent top, they're going to remember me. I mean, what an idiotic thing to do. So I walked into this casting looking like a clown, and they said to me, yeah, I think you'd make a really good secretary. And I was like, okay, this is just not going to happen for me. Then I got a probably fifth rate agent who never called me. And I called him up one day and I'm like, okay, David, haven't heard from you in a while. Have you got any jobs for me? And he's like, darling, I'm closing the agency. I've actually just landed a job in a Hollywood movie and I'm off to LA.
Oh, God.
And I remember putting the phone down and bursting into tears. My mother's like, Tara, darling, I think this is a sign. So, but no, I stopped acting. I went actually through a phase of writing performance poetry.
Right.
When I was working at Chuck Julian, actually, and I sort of got on the performance poetry circuit in London for a year or so, but then decided that no, I just need to focus on representing other people, not trying to be something myself. I can live without an Oscar personally.
Well, that's interesting. Do you feel that your experience trying to be a performance artist and also studying drama helped you as an entertainment manager?
Probably, yes. I mean, it was a very long time ago. We're talking, oh my God. I mean, I was at drama school like nearly, what am I now? 49. So like I left when I was 21. So that's 28 years ago. But yes, probably somewhere it has helped the understanding of how tough it is. Yes, definitely. And I also would be a terrible client to represent because I'm so impatient, and I'd be one of those, I'd be an irritating artist who would be calling my, manager or agent every 5 seconds asking for an update. And then, I'd be a nightmare to represent. I think it probably has helped.
Yeah. So do you feel that helps you understand the perspective of the people that you represent? Yeah, I would say so. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. Before we go into just getting your contact details for those listening, I just wanted to ask you, what's on the horizon for you at the moment? You've had this fantastic journey, worked with some incredible people and done some fantastic things. What's kind of your core focus in the next coming years? I would say one of the things that I've loved about being in LA is that for the first time in my life, work aside, I actually nested. Wow. I sort of bought a house. I got married. I've got a dog and 2 cats who are our furry babies who I adore. And I love family life. So that's really, really important to me. Really important to me. I used to be constantly on an aeroplane. And however much, as a manager, you need to be able to fly around and do everything, which I'm obviously happy to do. Having my family is the most important thing to me because earlier on in my career, I sacrificed a lot to have a career in that regard. So, business wise, I am excited about the people that I represent. I'm excited about the people that I may end up representing in the future. Love doing what I do and hope that continues to flourish. With regards to Dantar, I hope that Danny and I get a show commission. That would be incredibly exciting because we're so close right now with a number of projects. And in the meantime, we continue to build and we continue to create. And then my podcast, I just want to keep on doing it. And as long as people are entertained, I'll carry on doing it. So, who knows? But I feel lucky, and I just wish everyone sort of to stay safe and healthy during these challenging, unpredictable times. Absolutely. If you had any advice to anyone listening that's interested in getting into entertainment management, what quick advice would you give them? I would say you need to put in the years. I know that's not quick advice, but you need to put in the years. Don't think just because you have been doing it for 6 months that you know everything and you're ready to go, because you never stop learning in this business. You really don't. But I think you have to take every opportunity you're given. You can't rely on anyone and never presume. Presuming can be quite dangerous because it just might not happen. So you have to work very hard. You have to network, and you have to be quite. In Yiddish, there's a word called chutzpah, which basically means get up and go and courage. Yeah, I know chutzpah. Right. Yeah. Have the courage and the sort of oomph and don't be scared. Don't be scared to try something that you might not think is going to work, because it actually might. Well, Tara, this conversation has just whisked by. It's been awesome. I'm sure a lot of what you're saying is going to have so much value to the people listening. I've really enjoyed this discussion. If anyone that's listening wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that? Probably through the website, which is www.jamartistgroup.com, and there's an email on there, and I would love to hear from anyone who has any questions. And thank you, it's been a real honor to be on your show. I've really enjoyed it. Have you got any social media handles or anything that anyone can follow? Instagram is
at Tara Joseph. That's probably the best one. Or For Love and Music is at For Love and Music Official. I'd probably leave you guys with just those two, so it doesn't get too confusing.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Well, look, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciated it. For those of you that are listening, I hope you enjoyed that. Please do subscribe, and if you want to share any questions or anything, please do share with the social hashtag of Sanj Surati Talks. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, be good.